You've probably felt it, that quiet frustration that comes from knowing you're smarter than most people around you, and yet somehow you keep losing to them. You see further, think deeper, and still watch others rise faster. You analyze while they act. You speak truth, and they twist it into control. You plan for months, and they win in a day. It's not that you're weak, it's that no one ever taught you how dangerous intelligence becomes when it isn't trained for power. This isn't another lecture about thinking positive or believing in yourself. This is a dismantling of the curse that haunts the gifted. The curse that turns awareness into hesitation, brilliance into burden, and clarity into paralysis. In this journey, you'll learn how to strip your intelligence of its fragility and rebuild it into strategy. How to become invisible, decisive, and untouchable. By the end of this series, you won't just think like a genius. You'll move like a ruler. You'll stop fighting to be understood and start learning how to be obeyed. Because intelligence alone doesn't make you powerful. Discipline does. And what you're about to hear will show you how to turn that discipline into empire. The world is filled with brilliant minds who die poor, unheard, and forgotten. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because they could not act. They saw everything, predicted everything, and still achieved nothing. Their minds were like palaces, magnificent, complex, and entirely uninhabited. The greatest tragedy of genius is not stupidity, it is paralysis. The sharper the mind, the slower the motion. The more angles you see, the less certain you become. And while the genius studies the battlefield, the fool charges forward and wins by accident. Ask yourself, how many ideas have you buried in the graveyard of hesitation? How many victories did you watch from a distance because you were still thinking about the best way to win? The truth is harsh. The ones who see the most possibilities often do the least with them. Overthinking is the silent executioner of ambition. The intelligent man becomes addicted to clarity, to the illusion that one more insight, one more plan, one more calculation will make the risk disappear. He studies every variable, weighs every consequence, and in doing so kills momentum with reason. But the world does not reward perfect timing, it rewards decisive movement. While the genius waits for alignment, the opportunist acts in chaos and turns it into order. Intelligence becomes a curse when it demands precision before permission. You cannot outthink uncertainty, you can only dominate it through action. Every second spent debating what could go wrong is a second lost to someone already building what you only imagined. Machiavelli warned that excessive contemplation weakens the will. He understood that clarity without motion becomes self-sabotage. The ruler who waits to understand everything before acting will die in the shadow of those who move with half the knowledge but twice the courage. The difference between the thinker and the conqueror is not intellect, it is execution. The thinker needs confidence before acting, the conqueror acts to generate confidence. You believe your intelligence protects you, but it often imprisons you. The desire to know too much before moving blinds you to the simple truth. Knowledge multiplies faster than courage. By the time you have enough information to feel safe, the moment is already gone. Look around you. The scholar who spent 10 years preparing his masterpiece still edits the first page. The entrepreneur who studied every market trend watches another man launch the same idea with less research but more audacity. The perfectionist writes drafts of messages he never sends. And all of them console themselves by believing that someday, when they're ready, the world will wait. But the world never waits. The throne goes to whoever has the nerve to sit on it first. You've seen it. The less intelligent rise through motion while the brilliant drown in hesitation. They analyze their way into irrelevance. The smarter they are, the more fragile they become because they believe their intelligence alone entitles them to victory. It doesn't. Life rewards aggression disguised as initiative, not hesitation disguised as wisdom. In every field, from war to business, the decisive man terrifies the thinker. His ignorance becomes his shield. He moves, he fails, he learns, he adapts, and each movement creates power through momentum. Meanwhile, the genius builds castles of logic in his mind, explaining why now is not the right time. He convinces himself that patience is strategy, that caution is control. But caution, when excessive, becomes cowardice in disguise. Every empire was built by men who acted before they knew enough. Alexander didn't conquer the world by waiting for perfect odds. Caesar didn't cross the Rubicon after a month of analysis. They understood that hesitation kills faster than error, because error can be corrected, but hesitation cannot be undone. Once you hesitate, someone else's action defines your fate. The mind that cannot act is like a sword that refuses to strike for fear of breaking. What use is its sharpness if it never cuts? Overthinking disguises itself as intelligence, but it is often fear wearing the mask of intellect. The fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing control. Yet in the theater of power, control belongs not to the one who understands, but to the one who moves. You cannot think your way into dominance. You must act your way into it. The cunning know this. They study only to strike faster, not to delay. Their intelligence serves their will, not the other way around. Understand this. Overthinking is the luxury of those who do not intend to rule. Those who hold power cannot afford the paralysis of endless logic. The strategist thinks to act. The philosopher thinks to think. One conquers, the other comments. And the more intelligent you are, the more dangerous your mind becomes, not to others, but to yourself. You become your own saboteur, inventing invisible barriers, endless reasons, and imaginary risks to justify inaction. Every second of hesitation strengthens the hand of mediocrity. Those below you in intellect surpass you in influence because they have learned the most Machiavellian lesson of all, that the world bows not to the brilliant, but to the bold. Ask yourself, how many empires have been lost, not through stupidity, but through hesitation? How many rulers delayed decisions until opportunity vanished? How many visionaries died with perfect plans still in their minds? Intelligence is not meant to freeze you. It is meant to guide your fire. Think, yes, but only to sharpen your strike. Plan, yes, but only to move faster than your enemy expects. The goal of thought is not to know everything, but to manipulate what you know into advantage. Every plan must end in movement. Every analysis must end in attack. Otherwise, thought becomes the slow poison of the gifted. The world does not remember those who almost acted. It remembers those who acted imperfectly, adjusted ruthlessly, and made motion their language. The smartest people always lose because they believe truth lives in their heads. But the truth that shapes reality belongs to the ones who act first and force others to adapt. Action is intelligence in motion. The wise man understands that hesitation and brilliance often share the same face, but only one builds empires. And so, if you are cursed with intelligence, you must learn to weaponize it. Do not think to understand, think to move. Do not plan to perfect, plan to strike. And when doubt whispers its logic, remember, no man has ever ruled the world by waiting for the right time. He ruled because he made the time right by acting when others froze. In part 2, you will see the next illusion that destroys the intelligent, the vanity of being right. Because in the world of power, it is not truth that wins, but perception. And those obsessed with being correct rarely notice when they are being conquered. The most dangerous addiction for the intelligent man is not pleasure, not comfort, but the obsession with being right. It is the quiet vanity that disguises itself as integrity. It tells him that his value depends on correctness, not results. And so he spends his life proving instead of moving, debating instead of dominating, perfecting arguments while others perfect control. Machiavelli warned that the truth itself is powerless in the hands of those who cannot wield it strategically. It doesn't matter if you are right. It matters if your version of reality becomes the one others obey. That is the difference between intelligence and power. The first wants recognition, the second wants control, and only one survives. Every genius carries this disease, the need to explain, to justify, to correct. He believes that if he lays out the truth clearly enough, the world will submit to reason. But the world does not bend to logic, it bends to leverage. A fool with influence will crush a genius with evidence every time. Because perception, not precision, rules human behavior. The Machiavellian understands this. He doesn't need to be right, he only needs to appear unshakable. He allows the truth to shift beneath him if it preserves his advantage. He studies how others cling to their correctness like armor, and he uses that rigidity to trap them. The more you need to be right, the easier it is for someone who doesn't care about truth to control you. Look at the battlefield of business, politics, relationships. The pattern never changes. The intelligent argue from facts. The cunning argue from power. The intelligent defend their position. The cunning manipulate perception. The intelligent need applause. The cunning need obedience. This is why geniuses lose in silence. They think victory is earned by proving the truth. But victory is seized by shaping belief. The genius fights to be understood. The ruler fights to be obeyed. One plays chess on a board of logic. The other flips the board when the timing suits him. And while the genius collects validation, the strategist collects results. You see this every day. The analyst who is technically correct but always ignored in the meeting. The inventor who perfects his design but never sells it. The philosopher who diagnoses society's flaws but holds no influence over it. The smartest man in the room often ends up the most powerless because he mistakes accuracy for authority. He forgets that being right and being obeyed are two different forms of victory, and only one builds empires. Knowledge without dominance is just decoration. It feeds the ego but starves the will. And when you need to be right, you give the world the easiest way to break you by simply refusing to acknowledge your correctness. This is why the powerful rarely argue. They do not explain, they act. Their silence creates pressure. Their calm becomes intimidation. The more others argue for truth, the more foolish they appear, because in the arena of control, explanations signal weakness. Every time you defend your stance, you confess uncertainty. Every time you seek to correct, you reveal dependence on validation. The ruler knows truth is a weapon, not a mirror. It must be aimed, not admired. The goal is not to be proven right. The goal is to make your words shape what others believe is right. That is influence. That is power. Understand this. Intellectual pride blinds you to the laws of perception. You think truth is sacred. Machiavelli knew it was flexible. The most effective men bend truth into architecture, framing narratives that shape behavior, while never revealing their full intent. They allow others to win arguments while they win outcomes. They let the pride of correctness consume their enemies. For in the theater of power, the smartest opponent is the easiest to manipulate. He cannot stand the idea of being misunderstood. He cannot tolerate the illusion of being wrong. So you feed him small contradictions, provoke his explanations, and watch as he destroys his composure trying to prove himself. His pride will do the work for you. If you want to survive among wolves, you must learn this law. Truth is not light, it is a tool, and tools do not serve morality, they serve intent. The truth you reveal should only strengthen your influence, never your reputation, because reputation can be destroyed by envy, by rumors, by whispers. But influence reshapes reality, so even lies serve your design. The intelligent man worships truth like a god. The ruler uses it like a blade. When your knowledge becomes too honest, it becomes predictable, and predictability is death in a world where everyone is watching for weakness. You must train yourself to value outcomes more than arguments. Let others waste their energy correcting, you will redirect. Let them seek applause, you will seek position. Learn to detach from the emotional satisfaction of being right. You do not need to win debates, you need to win direction. Every ruler in history mastered this separation between truth and utility. They understood that control depends on perception, and perception belongs to those who speak last, not those who speak loudest. The one who can let the world misjudge him without protest becomes invincible because he no longer fights for validation. You will be misunderstood, you will be criticized, and the urge to defend yourself will burn like fire. That is the test. The need to be right is the ego's final chain. Break it, and you enter the realm of quiet dominance. The world no longer controls your peace. You no longer explain, you influence. You no longer react, you redirect. And suddenly, you begin to see what Machiavelli saw, that truth itself bends to the will of those who do not need it. In the next part, we will descend deeper into the psychology of power, into the trap of transparency, where the intelligent destroy themselves by revealing their logic, their motives, and their moral code. Because power, once explained, loses its mystique, and in the absence of mystery, respect dies. The tragedy of intelligence is not only that it hesitates, it exposes itself. The mind that seeks understanding also seeks to be understood, and that hunger for transparency becomes its downfall. The genius, obsessed with clarity, believes that if people only knew his reasoning, his motives, his heart, they would trust him. But Machiavelli warned that transparency, not deceit, is the true weakness of the intelligent. The one who explains everything gives his enemies the blueprint to his destruction. The moment your thoughts are visible, you are no longer dangerous. You are readable, predictable, and therefore controllable. The smart man reveals his logic as proof of honesty. The cunning man conceals his logic as proof of power. Transparency is seductive because it feels moral. It gives the illusion of purity, of sincerity, of being different from the schemers. But the world does not reward transparency, it exploits it. Every sentence you clarify becomes ammunition for someone else's agenda. Every confession you make becomes leverage. Every honest motive becomes a handle that others use to pull you in directions you did not choose. The clever call it authenticity. The powerful call it exposure. You have seen this play out. The entrepreneur who reveals his full plan too early, only to watch competitors mirror it faster. The intellectual who lays out his principles openly, then wonders why the world uses his own morals against him. The idealist who shares his goals, his fears, his vision, and is suddenly surrounded by allies who are really spies, supporters who are really scouts. Transparency feels safe because it makes others nod in agreement. But in truth, every time you reveal your reasoning, you give the audience a map of your weaknesses. The world doesn't fear the man who explains himself. It fears the man it cannot read. Machiavelli understood that mystery is the armor of rulers. People obey what they do not fully understand. The moment they can predict you, they stop respecting you, because predictability breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds contempt. When you are transparent, people stop fearing your silence. They start planning around it. The powerful maintain deliberate ambiguity, not because they are liars, but because opacity forces others to think twice before acting against them. When your next move cannot be anticipated, your presence becomes a question mark. And in power, being a question mark is safer than being an open book. You must learn the art of strategic invisibility. Say enough to appear clear, but never enough to be decoded. Let people know your actions, not your motives. Reveal direction, not intention. Keep your logic hidden beneath layers of simplicity. The most dangerous man is not the one who hides everything, but the one who hides just enough. He gives others fragments, patterns that mislead, truths that conceal other truths. His silence becomes a maze. Those who try to read him end up trapped inside their own interpretations. The moment people think they understand you completely, they stop respecting your depth. The moment they fail to understand you entirely, they begin to fear it. This is not deceit, this is survival. The transparent man believes openness creates trust. The ruler knows it creates dependency. When people cannot predict you, they must adapt to you. Their minds orbit yours. You become the gravitational center of their uncertainty. The silent general terrifies the enemy more than the one who shouts his plans. The calm negotiator, who says little but watches everything, unnerves the loud one who keeps explaining himself. The more you speak, the less they listen. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. And imagination, in the minds of others, is the most powerful form of control. Understand this. Transparency feels righteous but kills leverage. You cannot move freely when everyone knows your reasoning. You cannot shift position when every principle is public. The transparent man becomes predictable. The predictable man becomes replaceable. Secrecy allows adaptation. It gives you the freedom to contradict yourself without losing your reputation, because no one fully knows what you stand for. It allows you to change direction without announcing weakness. The genius locks himself inside his own honesty. The strategist moves through shadows of ambiguity, unseen and unjudged. You must become a mirror, not a window. A mirror reflects what stands before it, but shows nothing of what lies behind. When people look at you, let them see themselves, their projections, their desires, their fears. Let their curiosity be the veil that hides your intent. You do not need to reveal who you are. You need to make them reveal who they are. Every confession you resist forces them to expose more of their motives. Every question you leave unanswered becomes a test, and in watching how they react to your silence, you see their truth. Transparency blinds you, mystery illuminates them. The greatest kings were not known by their speeches but by their silences. They ruled through the power of withheld information. When you control what others do not know, you control how they behave. That is the essence of stealth power, to become so restrained that your quietness shapes their imagination. People will invent reasons for your silence. They will debate your meaning, exaggerate your strength, and build myths around your restraint. The longer you resist explaining yourself, the more authority you gain, because authority, at its core, is psychological distance. You cannot dominate minds that see through you. And yet, this is where most intelligent people fall. They want to be transparent because they fear being misunderstood. They believe that if they explain enough, the world will see their purity. But the need to be understood is the death of influence. When you explain, you give control to your audience. When you withhold, you control them through uncertainty. The fear of being misjudged must die before power can live. The more complex your mind, the more silence it must learn to hold. So ask yourself, how many opportunities have you lost because you revealed too much too soon? How many alliances have turned against you because you made your logic visible? How many victories did you sabotage by explaining the truth to people who only wanted advantage? The ruler learns to protect his reasoning like treasure, not out of paranoia, but out of discipline. The more you conceal, the more room you have to maneuver. The less they know, the more they assume. And in their assumptions, you find control. In part 4, we will descend into the next illusion that destroys brilliance, the fragility of idealism. Because the intelligent often believe the world runs on reason, when in truth it runs on fear, emotion, and perception. And the one who tries to correct the world with logic will always be devoured by those who know how to control it with illusion. The intelligent believe the world is rational, that people, given enough logic, will choose fairness, that truth, when illuminated, will dissolve corruption. But this is the most fatal illusion of the gifted mind, the belief that reason rules men. Machiavelli knew better. He saw that the world does not run on logic, but on force, perception, and emotion. It is not fairness that governs decisions, but fear, not virtue, but survival. Idealism is the genius's final blindness, the belief that goodness is a shield, but in the arena of power, goodness without strength is bait. The genius builds castles of principle in a city ruled by instinct. He believes that by being fair, others will be fair in return. But fairness exists only where power is equal, and it never is. The powerful will always define what fairness means. They will use morality as a tool, not a code. They will frame their gain as virtue, their control as justice, their dominance as what's right. The intelligent, believing in balance, walk willingly into traps made from their own decency. They assume others think like them, rationally, ethically, transparently. But to those who understand human nature, idealists are the easiest to manipulate. Look at every institution that claimed to protect truth. It was devoured from within by men who spoke the same moral language but played a different game. They understood that the appearance of goodness disarms the intelligent faster than any weapon. The Machiavellian uses morality as camouflage, a mask of virtue to hide ruthless intent. The idealist shows his honesty as a trophy. The ruler uses it as theater. This is why the cunning never argue morality. They perform it. They let others preach it while they redefine it through action, because the crowd does not follow what is right, it follows what appears righteous. The intelligent lose because they assume reason can correct corruption. But corruption is not a mistake, it is a design. The powerful do not break rules, they build them to protect their interests. And when the idealist tries to expose this with logic, he threatens the structure that feeds everyone above him. He expects applause and receives exile. He expects reform and meets retaliation. Machiavelli saw this in every republic, every court, every kingdom. The ones who spoke the truth too soon, or too purely, were destroyed by the very people they tried to awaken. The world does not crucify fools, it crucifies reformers. Idealism also makes the intelligent fragile, because to believe in fairness is to depend on it. The moment the world reveals its cruelty, the idealist collapses. He cannot adapt, because his identity is built on what should be, not what is. He mistakes emotional shock for moral superiority, as if being disappointed by humanity makes him righteous. But disappointment is not a virtue, it is proof that you misread the game. The ruler expects treachery, envy, and deceit. He does not curse them, he calculates them. The more intelligent you are, the more detached you must become. Logic is your tool, not your God. Do not misunderstand. This is not a call to abandon morality, but to weaponize it. Appear moral, speak of virtue, display empathy when useful. But understand that morality is perception management. The ruler uses goodness as a language, not a limitation. He gives others the comfort of believing he plays by their rules, while silently rewriting them in his favor. The world will forgive cruelty sooner than weakness. You cannot afford the naivete of believing purity wins. It only wins sympathy, and sympathy is the consolation prize of the defeated. Idealism must be broken before mastery can begin. To rise, you must learn emotional realism, the ability to see corruption without despair, betrayal without shock, chaos without paralysis. The idealist says, it shouldn't be this way. The ruler says, it is. Now how do I turn it to my advantage? Power does not demand purity, it demands composure. The moment you expect the world to be fair, you give it permission to break you. You must learn to observe wickedness without personal offense. Treat deception like weather, predictable, inconvenient, but never shocking. Do not waste energy mourning human nature, use it. Manipulators depend on your outrage. They thrive on your disbelief. When you stop reacting, they lose control. The calm man among the emotional becomes the most powerful in the room. The stoic mind terrifies the sentimental one. When everyone else burns with righteousness, the man who remains cool holds dominion over them all. Understand this law. Emotion governs the masses, but composure governs the rulers. People follow whoever gives them the illusion of stability, not whoever speaks truth. So learn to project control even in injustice. The world will always be irrational, but you can weaponize that irrationality. When others rage at unfairness, you can maneuver. When they protest what should not be, you can exploit what is. Reason is not about making the world logical, it is about surviving a world that isn't. The genius who learns this transforms. He stops preaching and starts directing. He stops explaining morality and starts orchestrating perception. He becomes untouchable because he no longer depends on decency to protect him. He acts in alignment with truth, but never in submission to it. He uses idealism as bait to attract allies, calm enemies, and mask ambition. And beneath that mask, he operates with quiet ruthlessness, knowing that the game is not to be fair, but to endure. In Part 5, we enter the next battlefield, the weakness of isolation. Because even the most intelligent mind, when cut off from others, becomes powerless. Geniuses retreat to think, rulers build alliances that move, and the one who hides too long in solitude becomes invisible, not from strength, but from irrelevance. Isolation is the silent poison of the intelligent. It begins as pride, the conviction that no one else can think at your level, and ends as weakness, because brilliance without networks dies unheard. The genius withdraws, seeking clarity, purity of thought, and control over his own ideas. But Machiavelli knew that solitude, while useful for reflection, is fatal for influence. A man who hides to perfect his mind soon discovers that power belongs not to the one who sees clearly, but to the one who moves others. The solitary may understand the world, but only alliances can shape it. The intelligent retreat to think, to design, to refine. They believe the world will one day come to them, drawn by the magnetism of their ideas. But the world does not reward the best ideas. It rewards the loudest movements. An idea without allies is a whisper against an army. Every empire was built on connections disguised as coincidences. Every revolution began with men who decided to cooperate before they agreed. Solitude breeds purity, yes, but it also breeds impotence. The longer you hide, the more irrelevant your insight becomes. The more you refine, the less you adapt. Isolation feeds the illusion of superiority. You begin to mistake your distance for strength. You convince yourself that the crowd's noise is beneath you, that their misunderstanding proves your genius. But isolation is deceptive. It feels empowering while it quietly drains your influence. Because power, by its nature, is social. It requires networks to flow through, faces to represent it, loyal hands to execute it. You can know everything and still command nothing. You can see every flaw in the system and still be crushed by it, because you never built the alliances to withstand it. Machiavelli understood this law of survival. The lone ruler is the easiest to overthrow. He has vision but no eyes in the crowd. He has will but no extensions of power. He cannot protect what he builds because he stands alone before enemies who coordinate. Solitude is clarity, but clarity without reach is fragility. The world belongs to those who master influence, and influence requires proximity. The cunning build networks not out of friendship but function. They understand that every connection, every conversation, every favor given or received extends their reach, even when they remain unseen. The genius isolates himself to preserve purity. The strategist mingles to collect leverage. He listens not for agreement but for weakness. Every word spoken by others becomes intelligence. Every favor extended becomes future currency. He speaks little, but his presence circulates like rumor, shaping rooms he isn't in. This is the paradox of connection. The more people you influence, the less you need to appear. Isolation keeps you pure. Connection makes you powerful. You must choose. Because no man can be both untouchable and effective. Understand this: isolation is not silence. Strategic invisibility is not withdrawal. The invisible man moves through networks like a shadow, present everywhere yet owned by no one. He collaborates without loyalty, unites others without revealing his full intent, and benefits from every alliance without ever depending on one. This is not friendship, this is architecture. He builds systems of interdependence. Others need him, but he needs none of them completely. He creates the illusion of unity while secretly remaining the center of gravity. If he falls, others collapse. That is how isolation is transcended, not by dissolving into the crowd, but by making the crowd orbit you. The intelligent often isolate because they despise politics. They call it manipulation, hypocrisy, or compromise. But what they call politics, the ruler calls structure. To reject it is to reject power itself. Every hierarchy is built on the management of perception, loyalty, and fear. You can complain about the corruption of it, or you can master it. The Machiavellian knows that the game cannot be escaped. It can only be dominated. The one who stays alone to stay clean does not preserve integrity. He preserves irrelevance. The one who enters the game and learns to navigate it controls both his image and his destiny. Isolation also destroys resilience. When the intelligent man finally faces betrayal or crisis, he breaks quickly because he has no network to absorb the shock. He has no informants to warn him, no allies to defend him, no supporters to amplify his truth. The isolated live entirely by their own effort, which means a single mistake can end them. The connected distribute their risks. They have multiple escape routes, multiple sources of strength. Power is not in knowing, it is in linking. Every connection is a silent insurance policy against destruction. To rise, you must learn how to weave your mind into motion, to let others carry fragments of your vision while you stay behind the curtain. This is not dependency, it is design. The ruler never fights alone. Even his silence has voices echoing it through others. He speaks once, and a dozen mouths repeat his message. He acts once, and 100 hands enforce his will. That is how a single mind becomes a force. A man who thinks alone can only move himself. A man who builds networks moves the world. So ask yourself, are you isolating to grow or to hide? Is your solitude a forge or a coffin? Reflection is power only when followed by coordination. Withdraw when you must think. Return when you must rule. Machiavelli would tell you clarity belongs to solitude, but victory belongs to structure. A mind without a network is like a sword without a hand, sharp but useless. In part 6, we will reach the final paradox, the paradox of intelligence. Because even the sharpest mind must learn that power does not come from knowing everything, but from acting at the right moment. And in the theater of control, the intellect that hides behind simplicity often conquers the one that flaunts its brilliance. The final tragedy of brilliance is that intelligence, when left untempered, begins to consume itself. The mind that sees everything begins to believe it must act on everything. It becomes restless, always scanning, always refining, always preparing, and in that endless cycle, action loses its force. Machiavelli warned of this paradox. The sharper the mind, the heavier the burden. For the genius who cannot restrain his intellect becomes a slave to it, forever observing, never striking. But the true strategist, the silent ruler, understands that mastery is not in knowing too much, but in knowing when to stop knowing. The world belongs not to the one who understands the most, but to the one who acts with perfect timing. The Machiavellian sees that there is power in stillness, that restraint is not weakness but precision. The fool reacts too soon, the genius hesitates too long, but the ruler moves at the exact moment when his motion becomes destiny. He has studied enough to sense the current, but not so much that he drowns in it. Knowledge is meant to guide the blade, not dull it. The mind must serve movement, not replace it. Every age is filled with the same spectacle. Brilliant men explaining why they did not succeed. Their reasons are flawless, their logic airtight, their foresight impeccable, but their legacy empty. They could predict every storm except the one inside themselves, indecision. Meanwhile, those of lesser intellect rise quietly, not because they outthink them, but because they outmove them. The world rewards those who act with conviction more than those who analyze with brilliance, because people follow confidence, not correctness. In the empire of action, logic is merely scaffolding, movement is the monument. This is the paradox of intelligence. The mind that sees everything must learn to pretend it sees little. The truly powerful hide their intellect behind simplicity. They speak less than they know, act slower than they think, and appear calmer than they feel. They do not need to display their insight, they weaponize it. They wear mediocrity like armor, allowing others to underestimate them. Every great strategist has mastered the art of deliberate ignorance, choosing not to know what doesn't serve control. Intelligence without discipline is noise. Intelligence with restraint becomes silence, and silence in the hands of power is command. You must understand, brilliance that demands recognition dies in the open. The ruler's mind operates behind curtains. His genius is invisible until after the victory. By the time others realize his brilliance, the battle is already over. The genius who craves acknowledgement announces his own limits. The one who hides his light multiplies it. Simplicity is the camouflage of mastery. The more intelligent you are, the more you must disguise it. Because when others cannot measure your depth, they drown trying. This is why true power always feels effortless. It's not because it is simple, but because it has learned to appear so. The ruler speaks plainly, acts decisively, and lets the world imagine complexity where there is none. He does not reveal his calculations, he lets outcomes prove them. He knows that mystery amplifies authority, and authority multiplies influence. The mind that explains itself too much loses its mystique, but the one that reveals nothing becomes a legend. Machiavelli understood that the mind is both sword and snare. If you cannot control it, it turns against you, making you too aware, too cautious, too moral, too visible. The true strategist masters detachment from his own brilliance. He knows when to step back from the infinite possibilities his intellect creates. He knows that perfection is the enemy of conquest. He knows that timing is worth more than talent. The fool believes in luck, the genius in certainty, but the ruler believes in rhythm. He moves not because he knows everything, but because he feels the right moment to strike. To cultivate power, you must turn your intelligence inward until it becomes instinct. Study until thought becomes reflex. Train until clarity becomes silence. The goal is not to think faster, it is to think less, because your mind has already absorbed the pattern of power. The ruler no longer debates, he senses. He no longer seeks permission from logic. He acts as if the world has already agreed. And in that calm decisiveness lies the final evolution of intellect, motion without doubt. You must also learn to separate knowledge from identity. Most intelligent people cling to their intellect like a crown. It defines them, validates them, imprisons them. They cannot hide it because they need to be seen as smart. But this need betrays them. The ruler wears intelligence as a weapon, not as jewelry. He can appear naive, foolish, even ignorant, because his confidence no longer depends on being recognized. This is the ultimate invisibility, to be underestimated by all and yet control all. When you learn to hide your intelligence, you gain freedom. No one competes with the man they think they surpass. No one fears the mind they think they understand. You become like water, calm, formless, and unstoppable. People underestimate water because it does not roar, yet it wears down mountains. The same is true of silent intelligence. Its strength is invisible until it is irreversible. You must let your power accumulate in stillness until it erupts in inevitability. And so, this is Machiavelli's final warning to geniuses. The mind is your throne, but it is also your cage. If you cannot restrain it, it will drown you in possibility. If you can master it, it will make you unassailable. The highest form of intelligence is not analysis, it is timing. Not explanation, but control. Not expression, but restraint. The true genius does not seek to be understood, he seeks to be obeyed. In the next part, we will turn from thought to structure, how power, once mastered internally, must be built externally through quiet systems of loyalty, reputation, and perception. Because brilliance without an empire remains only potential, and potential left unused is the most tragic form of waste in existence. If you have followed this far, you have walked through the labyrinth that traps the intelligent, overthinking, vanity, transparency, idealism, isolation, and the final paradox of intelligence itself. You have seen how brilliance, when left untrained, becomes the most elegant form of self-destruction. You have seen how those who should rule often become their own prisoners, not because they lack power, but because they mistake awareness for control. Machiavelli's warning to geniuses was never an insult, it was a rescue. He saw what intelligence could become if it was not forged by experience, timing, and cold discipline. The tragedy of the brilliant mind is not that it sees too little, but that it sees too much, and does too little with what it sees. So how does one escape the curse? How does a mind meant to rule stop sabotaging itself? The answer is not to abandon intelligence, but to weaponize it, to convert knowledge into motion, insight into leverage, and perception into quiet control. To survive, you must become a strategist of your own mind. You must rewire brilliance into usefulness, and that begins by mastering the opposites of your nature. When your mind begins to overthink, respond with speed. Do not wait for confidence to appear. Create it through movement. Make small, deliberate actions that train your intellect to follow your will instead of paralyzing it. Replace endless planning with structured experimentation. The world rewards the bold, not the accurate. Each decision is a blade sharpened by use, not by theory. The goal is not to be flawless, it is to be inevitable. When you feel the vanity of being right, discipline your ego. Ask not, am I correct? But does this advance my position? Learn to trade righteousness for effectiveness. Truth is precious, but influence is priceless. The ruler knows when to remain silent even when he's right, because silence at the right moment creates more change than explanation ever could. Let others have the satisfaction of correctness, you will take the result. When tempted by transparency, hold your words like gold. Speak less, explain little. Let others wonder what you think. Control the gaps in their understanding. They will fill them with assumptions that favor you. Learn the language of subtlety, half-truths that reveal just enough, pauses that say more than speeches, smiles that make others uncertain of your intent. Mystery is your armor. The less they know, the more they imagine. When idealism blinds you, return to the cold realism of survival. Accept the world's imperfection without despair. Expect betrayal as you expect rain, inconvenient, predictable, and never personal. Do not preach morality, embody discipline. Virtue without strength is decoration. Strength with restraint is divinity. You are not here to fix the world, you are here to master it. When isolation seduces you, remember that even the most powerful must be connected. Withdraw to think, but return to command. Build networks like veins in a living empire, each one carrying your influence into rooms your body never enters. Create mutual dependencies, not friendships. Give others a stake in your survival so that protecting you becomes protecting themselves. The isolated man may understand truth, but the connected man shapes it. And finally, when intelligence itself begins to overtake you, when you find yourself lost in analysis, hungry for control, trapped in your own clarity, remind yourself of the rule that crowns all others. Act simply. Power lies not in seeing everything, but in doing what matters most, precisely and without delay. Hide your brilliance when it becomes too heavy. Speak plainly when others expect complexity. Let them think you are calm because you are simple, when in truth, you are silent because you are calculating. These are not moral lessons. They are survival codes. Each one turns the burden of intelligence into a weapon of influence. Overthinking becomes strategy. Vanity becomes composure. Transparency becomes mystery. Idealism becomes foresight. Isolation becomes structure. And intellect becomes timing. You are not meant to compete with fools. You are meant to rule them by discipline. If you live by these laws, your intelligence will no longer drain you. It will serve you. You will stop fighting your nature and begin shaping it into power. You will stop seeking applause and start commanding respect. You will stop chasing understanding and start directing outcomes. And the world which once ignored your mind will begin to orbit it, not because it finally understands you, but because it finally fears what it cannot read. Remember Machiavelli's warning: knowledge that cannot strike is not knowledge, it is decoration. The future belongs to those who act while others explain. The world does not bow to truth, it bows to force, framed as reason. Be both, the reason and the force. Think like a genius, move like a ruler, and speak like a mystery. That is how intelligence becomes empire.